All right, I've got a fascinating story for you today. It's about a type 1 diabetic who decided to basically throw out the rule book and challenge everything he thought he knew about his diet. He went on this pretty radical 6-month experiment and, well, the results were pretty shocking.
So get this. On the left, you see his old breakfast, a typical low-carb meal, right? Only about 15 grams of carbs. Now look at the right. That's his new breakfast, a huge bowl of fruit, oats, chia seeds, packing over 100 grams of carbs. Yeah, you heard that right. That's nearly 7 times more.
And this just leads to the one massive question on everyone's mind. How on earth could a person whose body doesn't produce insulin handle such a crazy increase in carbs? Not just for breakfast, but for his entire day. It seems impossible.
Okay, so to understand the how, we've really got to start with the why. See, our guy wasn't starting from a bad place. In fact, if you just looked at the numbers from his low-carb diet, you'd think he had everything perfectly under control.
I mean, look, his blood sugar metrics were fantastic on paper. His HbA1c, that's the long-term blood sugar measurement, was great. He was in his target glucose range 95% of the time. Awesome, right? But look closer. Even while eating so few carbs, he still needed 27 units of insulin every day. And that pointed to a hidden problem.
This right here, this is the crucial number. His carb-to-insulin ratio was just 2 to 1. What that means is for every tiny 2 grams of carbs he ate, he needed a whole unit of insulin. That's a huge red flag for some serious insulin resistance. Basically, his body was fighting the very insulin he was injecting.
And beyond all the data, there's just the real-life struggle. He found that being super strict with low carb was just incredibly hard to keep up forever. He'd do great for a while, but then, inevitably, he'd fall back into old habits.
And this is what happened during those off-track times. He'd start eating a more standard diet, lots of processed stuff. His carb intake shot up, his insulin needs just skyrocketed to over 41 units a day, and his good blood sugar control started to slip. This up and down cycle was the real reason he needed to find a solution that he could actually stick with.
So he starts doing some research, and he stumbles upon these 2 books, Mastering Diabetes and Reversing Diabetes, which pointed to a completely different and honestly a pretty controversial way forward.
The core claim he found was that a low-fat, whole-food, plant-based diet could dramatically improve insulin resistance. Now, this completely flies in the face of the conventional wisdom that carbs are the enemy. He was skeptical, for sure, especially seeing all the online critics calling it fake. But he was also desperate for a change. So he thought, you know what, I'm going to test this myself.
The rules for his experiment were simple, but they were definitely strict. Green light foods, like fruits and whole grains, he could eat as much as he wanted. Yellow light foods, things that are plant-based but higher in fat, like avocados and nuts, those were fine in moderation. And the red light foods, all animal products, oils and processed junk, were completely off limits.
So he commits to the plan, and honestly, the changes started happening way faster than he ever could have anticipated. After just 2 weeks, the results were already pretty mind-blowing.
Just check out this data. His carb intake jumped to 240 grams a day. That's even more than when he was on his standard diet. But the incredible part is, his daily insulin use dropped to just 22 units. That's less insulin than he was using on the super low-carb diet, and his blood sugar control actually got better. It's wild.
His carb-to-insulin ratio just leaped from 5 to 1 all the way to 11 to 1. That means his insulin sensitivity had literally more than doubled in only 14 days. This was the first real, undeniable sign that something profound was going on.
Okay, so 2 weeks is amazing, right? But could he sustain it? That's the million-dollar question. The real test was seeing if these results would actually hold up after a full 180 days.
And here they are, the numbers after 6 months. He was now eating a staggering 320 grams of carbs every single day. And yet, his insulin dose was down to only 21 units, and his time in range was back at that elite 95% level, identical to his best low-carb days, but with over 6 times the carbohydrates. Just think about that for a second. The final number just says it all. His carb-to-insulin ratio hit 15 to 1. That is a 7.5-fold improvement in his insulin sensitivity compared to where he started on his low-carb diet. Truly, truly remarkable. This chart really puts the whole journey into perspective. I mean, you can just see it. That little bar at 2 on the low-carb diet, it moves to 5 on a standard diet, and then
This massive, massive leap all the way to 15.
Let me put it another way for you. He was now using 90% less insulin for every single gram of carbohydrate he ate compared to when he started this whole thing. That is just an unbelievable gain in efficiency.
Now, this all sounds like a miracle, right? Almost too good to be true. But the transition, well, it wasn't exactly a smooth landing. He hit some pretty significant real-world challenges along the way.
So at first, eating so much fruit caused these really sharp blood sugar spikes. But then, as his body adapted and got more sensitive to insulin, he had the complete opposite problem: sudden, scary crashes. It required him to be constantly vigilant, and he had to slash his background insulin, that's the slow-acting stuff, by almost 50% just to keep up.
And this is a really key part of the story when it comes to long-term success. After that initial, super strict 90-day period, he found a balance that worked for him. He started reintroducing some fish and eggs, maybe once every few days, and found that it didn't really mess with his amazing results, but it made the diet so much easier to stick with.
And really, in his own words, this experiment completely changed his perspective. He proved to himself that for his body, carbs weren't the villain he'd always been told they were. It seemed like the source of those carbs was the thing that really mattered.
Now, it is absolutely crucial that we're clear about this. This is one person's story. It's a fascinating, personal experiment, but it's not a prescription. This is not medical advice, but it is a really powerful account of one person's journey to figure out what worked for him.
And that leaves us with this one big, provocative thought to chew on. His story really suggests that maybe, just maybe, our focus has been a little misplaced. It begs the question, could the type of food we're eating, whole foods versus processed foods, be far more important than just counting the grams of carbs? It's definitely food for thought.